How do we fix the housing challenge in Ghana today? Should it be private sector led or it should be government? What are some of the challenges that's making it difficult for government to get around the challenge of provision of affordable housing in Ghana today? Well, on PM Express Business Edition, you're looking at fixing the housing challenge in Ghana today as you engage the Minister for Works and Housing, Kojo Opon Nkrumah. Kojo, thank you so much for your time, and we do appreciate it so much. So, how are you settling in your new role from Chief Government Public Relations Manager to more of getting on the ground and working as lead Minister for Works and Housing?
For starters, I'm getting used to the hard hat and the boots.
Okay, and then the vest as well.
And then the reflectors. No, but on a more serious note, I think I've been here for a little over 4 weeks. The first 2 weeks was a handing over period. And then the following 2 weeks, I had to essentially get acquainted with all the departments and the work that they do and the briefs that are available. In the last 1 week, I've been on the ground, having gotten a sense of what can be done in the next 9 to 10 months. We've drawn up a strategic plan for 10 months, and then we are on the ground now trying to tackle the various buckets of issues. We do about 4 things here at the ministry. Number 1, we are responsible for the nation's flood control program. Number 2, we are responsible for the coastal protection program. Number 3, we are responsible for dealing with the big problem you spoke about, housing. And then number 4, for the regulation of the housing sector. So for each one of these 4 areas, we've settled on what we can do in 10 months, and that's what we are focused on now.
I mean, some would say that, yes, you hit the ground running, but coming to the ministry as well, has it given you a different perspective about the whole challenge, especially for the housing, state works and housing? You were there receiving briefs from your colleague ministers and all the rest. Has it given you a different picture on the issues on the ground when it comes to dealing with the works issues in the public space?
When you get on the ground and it is now your headache, it feels differently from when you are listening to the briefs and assisting the minister responsible for it to work out how to engage the public. I make a joke that previously, whenever I saw clouds, I didn't get too scared. Now, when I see clouds, I get very worried or extra worried.
Why?
Because I'm responsible for the flood control program. So you are quickly asking, how far have they gone with the dredging exercises and the drainage systems? Because we're already late in the day. The 2023 flood control program had funding challenges. And so not all the work that was required to have been done was done. And so we're already late in the day, even as the rains are approaching. And we have to speed up our work, push the contractors, get some more funding in so that we can mitigate against the potential challenges that flooding could bring. So when you are now the one who is responsible for the portfolio, it hits differently.
And you talked about flooding. It might be good to get an update on it about how prepared are we, because it's already started. For us building those resilient systems in place to manage. After all, force majeure, even a well-prepared country could face that challenge. So what is the state of the flooding preparedness in the country as you speak right now?
Flooding is an end product of a number of things. The volume of water that is coming in and the channels, the drainage channels for that water to exit a particular geographic area. If you have inordinate volumes of water, even the best drainage channels will not be able to accommodate it. And that's why in some of the most advanced countries, sometimes you still see flooding because the volumes that have come in since climate change, etc., are inordinate. Even if you have, average levels of water coming in and you don't have the adequate drainage systems to get rid of them, you will still have flooding challenges. And in Ghana, there are a number of drainage channels that all over the country are supposed to help drain the average volumes of water even before climate change hit us. In Accra alone, there are 9 basins. The Odo is just one. And I think after the June 3rd disaster, it became obvious that as a republic, we have not done enough investment in building the kind of drainage channels along these basins to get average or even above average volumes of water out. And so the World Bank assisted us with about $200 million to start work on the Odo under the GARID program. That work is behind schedule. honestly, and it's behind schedule because of a number of factors. We need to speed up the work on the garage project. We also need about $150 million additional funding on the garage project, which is
from the World Bank.
Yes, which is in Parliament, and we couldn't pass it because the Speaker adjourned the House sine die, though we had skills to take up that business. But we need to get that additional funding. We need to speed up the work so that at least 1 out of the 9, the Odo, can be adequately addressed. And then you have 8 more that need to be addressed with the appropriate drainage channels along these basins. And then across the country, if you go to the Ashanti region, if you go to the Eastern region, if you go to the Bono East and other places, there are major basins that require the necessary drainage channels so that when you have above average volumes of water coming in, they can drain them and then you can avert potential flood. So there's a lot of work that needs
But could you also wait for the
be done.
funding to come in? Some are saying that doesn't mean that we are now so much exposed because these works have not been completed.
We are exposed, to be honest with you. We are exposed. Under the National Flood Control Program, the government of Ghana is doing its bit. In 2023, we were supposed to do work to the tune of about 90 million Ghana cedis along some of the smaller drainage channels. And as I mentioned, funding challenges did not allow all of it to take place. We've come into 2024. So you have challenges from 2020. If you look at the medium-term program, 2023 works that have not been completed, and then you now have 2024 works that also need to be done, and possibly you catch up on the 2023 works. And then you have Garrett, which is just 1 out of the 9, which is also behind schedule. So we are exposed. We have to be upfront about it. But myself and my team are committed to run as quickly as possible to see what we can do during the period.
I mean, I asked for some explanation and a deeper understanding because for some people, they see this thing as just a dredging issue. These are gutters that are just stuck with silt.
No, it goes beyond that.
I'm saying that is it that can't something be done about just these normal works?
So you have basins that don't have any concrete works. You have water basins. Sometimes people call them small streams and other things. You have basins that are drainage channels that don't have any concrete works whatsoever. And you need to provide some sort of formwork to make it easier for water to get through and get out of the city when you have above average volumes of rainfall. That's number 1. Number 2, even when you've constructed it, then you have challenges of silt in some areas or the human behavior of dumping rubbish, etc., into them and choking them up in other areas. On some of our tours, we've had to ask the local assembly to take over from the Ghana Hydro Authority and take responsibility for the regular clearing of these channels where we've even done the concrete works. I think in Kaswa also quite recently when we went, while the concrete works are ongoing, you still find people dumping refuse in there. And we had to bring the local assembly on board to take charge and ensure that that is done. So you have places where you have to do concrete works. You have places where you have to do desilting and dredging. You have places where you have to do some integrated works on the grounds to ensure that at least the areas that are adjoining these concrete works and then the project affected persons can also move further away. So it's a complex challenge. As I mentioned, we're exposed because we are behind schedule, but we're going to do our best on it.
Because how fast is government going to move? How fast is the ministry going to move? Because it appears that when it comes to issue about nature, they don't care about your pace of work. And
that is true. Nature doesn't care about your pace of work.
At this big risk, come we say.
I am on the ground literally 2 out of the 3 days in the week. I work in the office just about 3 days, and then the other 2 days I am on the ground chasing the contractors and consultants to get a lot of work done. Government has a responsibility to ensure that when they are done with their work and their certificates are made available, we also pay them so that they can continue with their work. So you can have the commitment that we will run as quickly as we can, resources allowing.
Is this thing more of a funding problem or moving around the contractors and machinery and all those things?
I think it's a combination.
If we should get all the funding today, could you?
No.
Are we assured that things will move
It's a combination.
as fast as possible to
it's
get
a
it done?
combination because there are places where you have the funding, but the pace of work has been slow. In Garrett, for example, the funding is available, but the arrangements for consultants and other things that were put in place by the World Bank have been a bit cumbersome, and it has slowed the pace at which the work has gone. And I'm working with the World Bank to see how quickly we can, be up and running on the timelines on that one. In other areas, for example, the GOG funded ones, you have funding challenges as well. And then in some of the other areas, even on the GOG ones where you have funding, sometimes you have challenges with consultants and contractors that you got to run. So it's a combination. But I think the answer is on-ground supervision and pushing to get the work done. And that's what we are doing.
How are you whipping the local assemblies also into line? And clearly I'll say that for some of these areas, you realize that it is just the silting of the gutters could go a long way to minimize the exposure and the challenge.
Yeah, so two things. We have a responsibility to work in partnership with the local assemblies. One of the things we noticed that there were areas in which the local assemblies had been left out. So the Ghana Hydro Authority will go and construct a big storm drain and put a catch pit around it and will leave, but does not necessarily bring the local assembly on board to take ownership for the desilting of that catch pit on a regular basis. And so I've given instructions that now wherever we do any of these, you need to get the local assembly through with an MOU to take responsibility and to handle that regular desilting. But the local assemblies also have their funding challenges. The truth is that the District Assembly's Common Fund has not been very liquid at the assembly level for some time now. And so the resources that they require to also do a lot of this at their own level has been constrained. And we need to do better at ensuring that we make releases of the DACF to the assembly level so that MMDCs can have access to those resources and do the necessary desilting and dredging at the lower level where they can before the bigger jobs require us at the ministry to come in.
Could you let's come back to our main issue about the fixing of the housing challenge? And some would say that, can government fix it? Some are saying, let it be a private sector-led issue and government should just get out of it. Because over the years, successive governments have tried their best, but we're still faced with huge housing deficit.
The housing deficit currently in Ghana is about 1.8, almost 1.9 million units. Now, 1.8 million housing units is no joke. And government has a responsibility to provide leadership in addressing it. That government leadership mostly will come from having a policy framework that makes it easy, relatively easier for the housing deficit to be reduced. Unfortunately, over the years, the architecture that we have used in an attempt to tackle it, in my view, respectfully, has not been robust enough. Here at the Housing Ministry, we have only a staff of 7 in the Housing Directorate. 7 people to tackle a housing deficit of 1.8 million, you agree with me, it's a bit on the low side. And I think it speaks to the kind of architecture that we are using, because you need to develop a policy framework that even makes it easier for private sector to come on board and work with you. And so from our side, we need to do more. One of the first things that I've done is to ask the Office of the Head of Civil Service to help us have the necessary land economists and surveyors and architects and planning experts that we need here to make our housing directorate and its architecture a bit more robust so that we can have a comprehensive solution to the problem. Also, we only used to have an affordable housing unit. Then we have a rural housing department, which is a department on its own. And a couple of other desks that were supposed to help. And you would then notice that some of the projects we have tried to do as a republic have either been slow or have had gaps in there. So we've reorganized housing. Now housing is in 5 different departments. We've got the affordable housing department, and their job, as I've explained to them, is responsible for being directly involved in generating affordable housing projects. So like what we've started with TDC at Bung, where we've done 1,000 units already, and we're trying to work with the board chair and the chief executive. They've done a fantastic job so far to lock down funding and start a phase 4 within the next 4 weeks of about 800 additional units. It's something that my affordable housing department has been tasked with. Pokwase is supposed to do 8,000 units. They're already behind schedule on the groundworks. And again, if you have limited expertise to follow through and ensure that it works. That's what happens. But I was there yesterday. We're working with the consultants and the contractors to ensure that we can get the groundwork done quickly so that the building blocks start going up. So affordable housing is now a whole department, and we're going to be running with them hands-on directly. We have also now created a district housing department, because if you're talking about rural-urban migration, you ask yourself why. It's because when people are looking for their amenities and economic opportunities, they find them in the urban areas. Why wouldn't they all move to the urban areas? So we have to invest more in our districts. And one of the things we have to do, in addition to investing in economic opportunities, is to invest in housing. So we're just going to start a district housing program using Ghanaian building materials so that we can bring down the cost of those developments by maybe at least some 30%. That's the policy direction I've given them, some 35%, bring down the cost of the materials so that in our districts across the country, you can provide housing for teachers, nurses, doctors, public servants, people who are even working elsewhere, who are thinking of building a home back in the district or in the village, but don't want to go through the hassle of buying cement and mortar and every 3 months trying to do something, but can find a decent gated green community out there in the districts where they can live. So now we have district housing. We've also now got general housing, where we are looking at global best practices that attract private sector to come and develop master planned communities. Because we have to develop satellite communities both in the urban areas and in the districts. Communities where people can live, school their children, work, have social amenities, shop, have their religious activities, etc. These communities have to be master planned, and you need master developers to come in who are going to do 5,000 units, 10,000 units. Those people won't come if we're operating this kind of market. So you have to have direct policies that target those people that say that, listen, if you're a master developer and you have certified technology that makes your accommodation affordable or cheap, you have a layout that ensures that it's an integrated satellite community somewhere, and all the amenities are there. These are the incentives that we're going to give you. We're going to use some more local materials and things that probably have to import, the necessary waivers we have to do for you. Then we're able to provide incentives to master developers, like what Apollonia City is trying to do. You don't leave a community like Apollonia City on their own to build their own roads and other things. The state has to be interested in finding a way to support that, because shelter is a need for our people. If you don't do that, then landlords will always take advantage of tenants. So yes, you've got general housing. You've also now got public sector housing, where we are now focusing on developing housing for public sector workers and redeveloping some of the old public sector units. So my answer is that government has a role. That role is a role of leadership and direction. That's what we're trying to provide. But 1.8 million units, government can't build those houses. Government needs to attract the private sector, offer the private sector incentives, and work with the private sector to achieve
And one thing I'll be hammering more is the bit about the incentives, because some are saying that could be or is the way to go. This is PM Express Business Edition, as we gave the Minister for Works and Housing, Honorable Kojo Opoku-Nkrumah. We'll be engaging him on how can we fix the housing challenge in Ghana here today. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition, as we look at how we can fix the housing challenge in Ghana here today, engaging the Minister for Works and Housing, Honorable Kojo Opoku-Nkrumah. The bit about the incentives, how are we structuring these incentives to encourage more private capital into this field? Because some are saying that is the way to go. The supposed 1.8 million deficit, you can't do it alone.
Absolutely.
Bring in private sector, help them, assist them, make the environment more conducive for them, and they'll build the houses for you.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the way to go is to bring on board the private sector. I'm clear in my mind that that's what we need to do. But what specifically do you do for the private sector? And how do you balance that with the interests of the state? So in the last 1.5 weeks, I've engaged with GREDA, GREPA, quite a number of the developers in the built environment. And I've asked for the necessary policy proposals from them. As I mentioned, we've also set up a general housing department here that I've tasked to quickly do the comparison of the global best practices in this. We'll fuse the two, arrive at what we believe makes sense to private developers and makes sense to the Republic. I'll get the necessary cabinet approvals and we'll push through Parliament to get parliamentary blessing for what sort of package we can put together to attract private sector to invest heavily in the built environment or in the housing challenge. When you go to countries and you see these skyscrapers, all these apartment blocks, etc., it's not just left to the free market forces on their own. There's government thinking around it and government policy around it that makes it relatively easier for the private sector to do that. And that is what we intend to do here at the Ministry of Works and Housing. But we need to do that in consultation and in collaboration with the various actors in the space. And we're hopeful that we will get their cooperation so to do, and we will get the cooperation of Parliament. Remember that Parliament has passed an Exemptions Act, which recently has created a few issues.
It has been passed?
Yes.
Okay.
Parliament has passed it, and recently it's created a few issues for investors. Because for some analysts, it's beginning to make us an investment destination. That's in the view of some analysts. We need to examine it some more and perhaps tweak it a bit to be clear on where or sectors that we need to offer tax incentives and other related fiscal and sometimes non-fiscal incentives to investors to bring them in. Because the investor has capital and is asking himself, why should I take $10 million of my money to go build houses in Ghana as against South Africa? And if he's of the view that South Africa offers him, a better framework to do that, he will move that $10 million to South Africa. You in Ghana will now be saying, we need houses. Government can't build for us. Private sector is finding it too expensive to do that. How do we solve the problem? So all of us have to understand that we need to make the investment climate a lot more attractive for housing investors to come in and do the master developments that we are looking for.
What is the level of engagement between you and the Minister of Finance? And it comes back to the taxes issues. In one breath, as you're trying to incentivize private sector, there's this thing about the VAT on this real estate as well. And some of them have complained that, listen, you want us to help with the provision of houses affordable. These are some disincentives or something that would disincentivize us in the provision of quite affordable housing in the country.
First of all, there's a new Minister for Finance. There's a new Minister for Works and Housing.
Okay. Expect something new? Or expect something new?
Yes, I think so. And I think that we share views on the kind of policy interventions that must be rolled to stimulate some sectors of the economy, including housing. I'm also in deep engagement with the developers themselves, and they've made this case about the 5% VAT on real estate. And I even making the point that we need to discriminate in the market. And I'll explain to you why. If you look at the data, about 5% of the demand side in the Ghanaian housing market can provide their own houses. About 60% cannot provide their own houses unless you have some sort of affordable housing or district housing program that provides some sort of subsidy on the ground infrastructure. Then another 35%, even if you provided that, they cannot afford even the affordable housing. So they will need some sort of social housing before they can get a decent place to lay their heads. If you're going to do a VAT on real estate, is it across board? Or are you going to say that this 5% VAT applies to the 5%? This is one of the very strong proposals that I think Greta has made to me. As I mentioned, we are putting together the body of incentives. And I can assure you that some of these incentives will find expression in the body of incentives that we are putting together. And I mentioned that already the finance minister, as I engage with him, even informally on these matters, agrees with us that we have to stimulate the private sector to partner the public sector to do more. Remember, we are the party of private sector. We are the party that believes in private sector being the engine of growth, as President Kufuor famously said. And so we're going to translate that into practice in the policy instruments that we put out there.
Do you think that in trying to deal with this problem, some have said that, listen, looking at the cost input, let's forget about that term affordable. Because the cost input, let's say, for example, 100,000 naira, 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 Because we can't have affordable housing in Ghana here.
So there are two sides to the coin. There's a supply side. That is a supply of the building stock. And then there's the demand side. And when you say affordable housing, both sides must be affordable. So why are the cost of projects so high? Mostly it's the cost of inputs. If you go to America, the average building is not concrete as you see here. It's not brick and mortar, to use ordinary parlance, as you see here. And that has a way of reducing, therefore, the cost of the property you see there. If you go to Malaysia, the average building you see there is not exactly the same technology. So one of the first reasons for which we are having high cost of projects is the type of technology we are using to build in Ghana. Is there affordable technology? Is there technology that reduces the cost of buildings by 30, 35, even 40%? I was in South Africa recently at the hydrofoam factory, where they are using the compressed earth, etc. It reduces the cost of construction from what they were telling me, a 2-bedroom house. And I must say, also the dimensions are a bit smaller, going for about $6,000 because of the type of technology and sizes they are using. But if we are building concrete buildings here at large sizes, the cost will be higher. That's one. You also then have challenges with some of the imported materials that we are using for our construction.
Taxes as
so
well.
One of the first things we need to look at is the type of technology. We need to promote a lot more local technology construction. And it's one of the things that we want to go heavily on in our district housing program. The policy direction I've given the new district housing directorate is that we want to build with local materials for the district housing program so that we can cut the costs and promote the use of local materials. If you do that, you start dialing down the cost of these materials. Then secondly, construction finance. When the contractor needs to find money to put up the building, what is the cost of borrowing? 30%, 40%, 35% per annum? Then that building will not be affordable. So how do we assist them in bringing down the cost of construction finance? And as I mentioned, we've been having interactions with the Association of Bankers to explore ways by which we can reduce the cost of construction finance. Already we piloted the National Home Ownership Fund through the Finance Ministry, I think from about 2018, and it has worked well in Tema Committee 22. And we want to mainstream that model, particularly for our district housing.
People have access to own their own homes.
Oh yes, I was there yesterday. Already we've done about 400 units. People are living in there. And I'm working with the team to fast track work to do an extra 200 units so that we can get about 600 units there. But my point is this: you've got to deal with the cost of material. You've got to deal with the cost of construction finance. You have a third challenge, the land tenure system in this country. What's the cost of land? Yesterday, somebody sent me a message that he's selling land somewhere. He said $500,000. I said, if the land alone is $5,000,
you can get that in East Legon.
Well, but if the land alone is $500,000, then what's going to be the cost of the landed property in the end? But the point I'm making is this: if you deal with the technology, if you deal with the cost of financing, if you're able to deal with the land tenure system, you can reduce the cost on the supply side. And with the land tenure system, what we're doing is we're dealing with a lot of our land banks. So through State Housing Company and through the Rural Housing Development, we're acquiring a lot of land banks so that we can make it easier to bring down the cost on the construction side. On the demand side, there are very few banks in Ghana that are offering mortgages. You'll be surprised.
Don't say the salary level is also a major factor in here, that salary levels are quite low, and so you can't qualify for a mortgage.
But even before qualification, if you go to the Association of Banks and you run a check on how many banks have mortgage products, you'll be disappointed. I'm working with the Association of Banks, Johnny Wu and the team in that area, and the already available data we're looking at is a bit heartbreaking. How do we get a lot more banks to have mortgage products? They explained to me that part of the challenge is the cost of funds. Because if the average cost of funds in the financial sector is, 20%, 25%, 30%, and it's only available for 6 months or 9 months, they are going to have a difficulty in underwriting a 15, 20-year mortgage at anything lower than that 20% and for that tenor that you are looking for. So one of the things that they have requested is how we can assist them to crowd in pension funds to underwrite mortgages or to back mortgages. And already I'm in talks with the employment minister or the minister for pensions to explore how we can assist the financial institutions that way so that they can get cheaper long-term funding. And then on the demand side, they can also then underwrite affordable mortgages. It is when these two come together that you can find a 2-bedroom unit, let's say at $12,000 or $15,000 or $20,000, and somebody who is at least a salaried worker can then get access to a 15, 20-year CD-denominated fixed mortgage and then access it. But even that then applies to people who are salaried workers, because our economy is heavily informal. What is it? 70% or so of our economic activity in this country is informal. That's the bulk of our economic activity. We're in the Ghana month. If you study the history of Ghana, the market women who funded the struggle for independence, etc., up till now, and all these market women here, my friend down here who sells coconut to me every morning, they are all informal workers. Would they qualify for these mortgages?
No, they wouldn't.
So we have to get the banks also now to think ahead and now find innovative ways of credit scoring all of these, the majority of our people who are in the informal sector, so that if they can credit score them and they can do what they call financial inclusion, bring them into a certain formalized financial bracket so that they can see their income levels on a regular basis, then they can now explore ways by which you can be doing this business, but you can then qualify to fit into this big market.
Could you just talk about the housing fund? What are your thoughts about it in dealing with the fund and challenge issue for the provision of affordable housing?
So that is, I think, one of the things that has been piloted at the Ministry of Finance. And what it has done is that it first assists in construction financing, and then at the same time is used to assist to underwrite mortgages. I know Greta also is asking for a bigger version of a national housing fund. It's not a bad idea. It's an idea.
Is it feasible? Can it be done?
It is. It can be done. I mean,
government committed
Elon
to
Musk
doing
has
that?
developed a rocket.
Is government committed to doing that?
Elon Musk has developed a rocket that goes up and
minister
comes back to land, so it can be done. And I think Ghanaians need to move away from this. It's not possible. It can be done. Kind
it's
of
premised on the
mentality.
funding challenges globally and even locally as well.
Challenges are made to be overcome by man. We were created by God to have a dominion mandate, but that's a different matter.
It's possible.
So it can be done. What we need to do is to put our mind to what are the hurdles and the risks, and how do we work together to overcome them. So if we're going to do a housing fund, who should be contributing to the fund? Who should be administering the fund? What should be the purposes of the fund? How do we bring some transparency and accountability to the utilization of the fund? In Kenya, they have just signed an act that provides for a national housing levy, where salaried workers are now being deducted a certain amount to provide for the government interventions on housing. Because if government is doing drains and roads in Pokwasi for 8,000 people to live, those drains and roads and outer perimeter wall have to be paid for. So in Kenya, they've created a levy that allows the government to do this and to develop land banks that then make it easier to attract the private sector. So they've agreed on how to fund it. They've agreed on how to administer it. They have to bring some transparency to it. So it can be done.
Should we go that way?
I'm saying it can be done. I've asked for all of these proposals to be brought to my desk. We would get our teams to examine it, to examine the global best practices. And as I mentioned, we'll go to Parliament with a set of proposals which we believe will work for us. But the important thing is that we all come with a mindset that there's a problem we want to fix together, and we'll play our roles together to fix it.
Will these proposals include possible new levy or the existing tax system where it is creamed to that area? I mean, how can we deal with it now?
We somehow, I'm a lover of fiscal policy, and I've always argued that Nemo, that non-cord habit, you can't give what you don't have. The Republic must have it first to give it. So if we are looking for these interventions, we have to raise the monies for it. I don't have answers yet as to the path we will go.
The levy taxes,
but I think
existing levies can be creamed and moved into
I
that area.
think that we should put all cards on the table.
How serious this nature is.
I don't have answers yet. We should put all cards on the table. Let's all have a clear examination. What is working in other countries? What can we do here? And then let's
we talked about the exit council, and some are saying that even though we want to promote private sector, it appears that it's a free for all in the housing space when it comes to private sector. You want to tread cautiously because you want to also have a free market as well. Estate Council, what is their role?
In the
What
year
are they gonna do?
2020, Parliament passed the law for the Real Estate Agency Council, which is responsible for regulating real estate transactions and entities, persons who participate in real estate transactions. These days, you can be driving and you see a billboard that says that this building is $70,000.
Yeah.
Come and pay for it.
Yeah.
And you can go and pay for it, and 2 years after you've paid, you don't have the building. Who are you going to? They'll tell you, we're building. Well, now wait, not everybody has paid. We're building. Nobody's regulating the real estate transactions. And that's why in 2020 that law was passed. Unfortunately, from 2020 till now, the agency has not been operationalized.
Why?
One of my first tasks when I came in was to visit the office that has been allocated to them. I've given them up to the end of April for us to open it up and to staff it and for us to start functioning so that we can regulate real estate transactions and protect the interest of at least those who can buy property who are being given the short end of the stick by property developers. So there's a lot of work that needs to go on in the regulation of the real estate market. So between the Rent Control Board and the Real Estate Agency Council, we need to support them so that they are able to better regulate real estate transactions. I spoke to students from Legon who say these days one of the latest scams is people tell you they are real estate agents, you pay for viewing fee, and they don't even have access to the building they claim they have access to. Who is regulating all of that one? There are bodies that are supposed to be doing that. We need to resource them and urge them on so that they can do a better job to protect your interest and my interest.
Could you rent control? You talked about estate council, rent control. Some are saying that it's a big hassle there.
Yeah.
What are we doing about that?
We are reviewing the Rent Act itself to give them some more teeth to bite. They are also going through a digitization project to move some of their services online so that it's easier for people to access their services. And then, as I mentioned, we are also now trying to set up the Real Estate Agency Council so that they can also be stronger when it comes to regulating the sale and purchase of real estate.
Minister, if we come back, we're going to look at Saglemi housing project and the way forward, and also resettling some of these victims in the Volta area. This is PM Express Business Edition as we look at fixing the housing challenge in Ghana today. What is the way forward? Can we really talk about affordable housing? And Saglemi housing project, what is the latest direction for this area in terms of getting these houses fixed? Be right back after this break. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we look at how can government fix the housing challenge in Ghana today. And what is government doing about it? Minister, Saglemi housing project, what is government doing about it?
I think it's always important to recall the history of Saglemi. Saglemi was an affordable housing project for which the government of Ghana contracted a $200 million loan to construct 5,000 units for the benefit of Ghanaians. $196 million was paid and 1,000 units were partially developed. And there's no money to finish it because 196 million was paid, only about 1,000 partially developed units were developed. Minister Tachia commissioned the Ghana Institute of Surveyors to do a forensic assessment of the work that had been done there. And it didn't come up to even the 196 million that had been paid. And also, what had been left was uninhabitable. No sewage system. So if somebody on the third floor went to the washroom, it will just come sit downstairs. There's no sewage system to clear it out. No water, no electricity. And 196 million had been paid for it. And therefore, they also did an assessment of what it would take to finish it. And they came to the realization that another $100 million will be required to get Saglemi to a point of usability. And they started the process to request for $100 million for that. The government or cabinet declined that after spending $196 million for 5,000 units and only 1,000 partially developed units were availed, an extra 100 million of taxpayers' money could not be put into it. And so when Minister Asensu Boachi came, he started the exercise based on the cabinet directive to bring in private sector participation to complete Saglemi. So they put together a technical working group that had started some work. When I came in about 4 weeks ago, I've met with the technical working group. Yesterday, I had a site meeting with them at Saglemi to also see if what I'm reading on paper is the same as what is on the ground. And we went there with surveyors and a few other people to at least have a cursory view of what was on the ground. And I'm giving them 5 weeks. That within these 5 weeks, they should issue the international expression of interest to any entity anywhere in the world, and possibly even get on a roadshow to any entity anywhere in the world that this is what we have. 1,000 units partially completed. And it requires about 100 million to bring the Saglemi settlement to a point of usability. And we're looking for private partners who bring their private capital to complement what we have and finish it and join the government of Ghana to operate it together. And I'm hopeful that the technical working group will do a good job. It's a big development. We cannot leave it to rot.
Minister, hasn't government kept too long on this project with all the legalese and all the rest? And now we understand that additional capital is needed again?
We understood that somewhere around 2019, thereabout.
And what stopped government from getting the additional funding to do that?
When Minister Senso-Boakye, when Minister Atachian commissioned the Ghana Institute of Surveyors to do all of the work and determine how much was required to finish it. And since that time, as I've explained to you, there's been work ongoing to now get in the private funding to come on board to assess. The lot has now fallen to run as fast as I can with it. And I've given them within 5 weeks to issue that international expression of interest, to possibly even do a roadshow to get partners from anywhere in the world where they can come in with that $100 million private capital to help us to finish Saglemi and then put it to use.
This is private capital you're looking for. This is and again, you're a lawyer, Minister, help me out. Is the state structure and all the rest, what comes in the private sector person, few months to elections, the uncertainty and all the rest? How do you convince me if a Rockefeller has his investment wing for real estate to come in when, one, there's uncertainty about what happens after 2024 elections?
I think
all those legal challenges to help me out here.
Any watcher of Ghana's democracy must be clear in their mind about two things. There's no uncertainty about Ghana's elections. Ghana is a functioning democracy. The government of Ghana, by the grace of God, will continue in perpetuity. The administrations may change, even in the same political party. What will happen in January 2025? For example, my expectation is that Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia will win, will not be an Akufo-Addo administration. So even in the same party, it's not the same administration. So people who are looking to invest in Ghana must be clear in their mind that Ghana is a functioning democracy. There's no uncertainty about our elections. We will vote, we will count, we will declare. The one who has lost will concede. If he's not happy, he will go to court. The court will examine the evidence live on TV. We'll all see it. So Ghana's democracy, there's no uncertainty about it. You can be clear and you can invest in Ghana even 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months to an election because we're a functioning democracy. Let's be clear about that. Secondly, we also must understand that when you do business with the government of Ghana is a going concern. And if you have a contractual relationship with the government of Ghana, unless there is non-performance or some force majeure or some inhibiting factor, that contractual relationship ordinarily should continue. So we are clear in our minds that when we do this international expression of interest, whoever is coming is not coming to do a deal with Kojo Oponkroma. He's not coming to do a deal with President Akufo-Addo. He's coming to do a deal with the government of the Republic of Ghana, which is a going concern, which will continue in perpetuity by the grace of God, working through the Ministry of Works and Housing.
Can this capital be sought locally? There has to be sought outside to bring in. What are the options you're looking at locally to come on board, or a strictly international market?
So international does not mean we're excluding local. International means that not just limited to Ghana. So Ghana and any other part of the world. The Ghanaian investors or Ghanaian consortia that may be able to find the money and the technical know-how to come together and do this, we're happy to receive them. But we're not limiting ourselves to Ghana alone. That's why we're making it international. So Ghanaian investors can participate. Investors from anywhere in the world can participate.
Minister, I'm still worried about this because even within Parliament, there were some colleagues of yours who have raised concern that any private sector person that comes to take over, they warn that if there should be a new administration, that investment
I think
could
that
be
that
the
is,
problem?
I mean, I won't even let you finish. I think that that is irresponsible in a democracy. You don't have to start scaring investors that if you do a transaction with the Republic while this administration is in power, when I come to power, I'll cancel it. It's totally irresponsible. If we do it, it is irresponsible. If they do it, it is irresponsible. We should rather send a message to investors that you can do business with Ghana. Just do a good, clean deal, a deal that will stand the test of time, no matter who is in charge. So I don't think we should be attempting rather to scare off investors for parochial interest. We should rather encourage more investors to come to Ghana and do business with Ghana, regardless of which administration is in power. When investors come to this town and they create jobs, those jobs are not for me. They are for the millions of young people in this country who need those jobs. So I don't need to scare investors because I'm looking for political power. It's irresponsible.
Minister, there's also a legal issue with respect to this housing project. How are you dealing with that as a lawyer? What advice are you seeking from the Attorney General as well to do with, while this issue is still in court, the project can still go ahead and it will be completed?
Crime, there's no statute of limitation on crime. And the fact that a crime is alleged to have been committed does not mean that if a resolution is subsequently found to the subject of that crime, it takes away the crime that is alleged to have been committed. The Republic is of the view that a crime has been committed in this particular instance and has advanced that view in court, praying the court to examine the evidence that it has and possibly agree with it. The court that administers justice will examine that evidence and may or may not agree with the Republic. That's a totally different matter from the resolution of the assets that are sitting there. Those assets, we have to resolve them and bring them to use and create those housing units for our people. But the belief of the Republic that crime has been committed, which belief it has advanced before the courts, giving the courts an opportunity to examine and take a decision, that will also go on separately.
Minister, if the funds are secured today, all other things being equal, what are the clear timelines we have here, knowing that this administration, and I say this administration, has a few months to still be in office? What are the clear timelines that if the capital is raised today, you have X amount to complete the project? And then what happens next? Can I go in and get the building, or it will still be given to security men or public sector workers?
So two things. Within the 5-week period when the expression of interest is issued, the timelines for the next steps will be articulated by the technical working group. And I'm hopeful that we shall all be here when they come and make that announcement, and these questions will be answered. That's number one. Number two, we are also at the end of this exercise going to go into negotiations with whoever the private partner is. It won't do us a lot of good if I start putting all my negotiating cards on the table now. So, like Stephen Appiah said, let them come, and when they come, we'll do the negotiations.
But the critical thing is that when it's done today, at least it can be lived in within the close of this year, right?
I am not putting timelines to that. What we need to do is to secure a partner who has the money and the technical capabilities to finish it, and to commence that exercise of resolution. The government of Ghana, as I said, is in perpetuity. It's not about administrations.
Minister, the bit about resettling of the Akosombo spillage issue, what is government doing about it? Someone said that it's kept quiet too long.
87,000 people were affected by high water levels in 19 districts, 2 in the Greater Accra region, 2 in the Eastern region, 9 in the Volta region, 6 in the Oti region. For these 87,000 people or so, the initial step was to provide them a safe haven, support them with some relief items. The second step was to assist them to go back into their habitations. And out of that, we have realized that there are about some 5,000 homes that are uninhabitable. That's a preliminary data. And so whatever happens, we'll have to build some accommodation to resettle some of them. And so we've started breaking ground.
Work has started as we speak.
We've started breaking ground on the construction of the accommodation units. I'll go back there myself in a few weeks to
But
to
the thing is that the work has started as we
coming.
speak right now.
I think I've chosen my words very clearly. You have heard me. I said we've started breaking ground for work to start. I will go back there in a few weeks to see the progress of work that they are doing, with the first 100 units that we're asking them to put on ground, with the contract signed, etc., that they should get on ground and start all that. While they are doing that, we also need to validate the preliminary data that we have. As I mentioned, we've already seen instances where you have a nephew and an uncle living in one house, and the nephew says, I've lost a house, the uncle says, I've lost a house. If you don't take care, you'll build 2 houses. So you need to validate that data, and thankfully the chiefs, assemblymen, unit committee members, National Intelligence Bureau, they're all helping us to go through this final phase of the validation. So that when we are done with construction, the construction will be more than 100 units, but we're starting with the first 100 units because whatever happens, we'll still have to build. So it's better to start now. We're starting, we'll complete the validation of the data so that when it comes to allocation, it's easier. There are islands that were totally submerged or that have become uninhabitable. They have to come to the mainland. We are grateful to the regents who've given us land in some of the areas, Mepe, Bakpa, I think somewhere around Adidome and a few other areas. And we'll do our best to resettle our people across the 19 districts that were affected.
So all other things being equal, any clear dates or timelines where
these first 100 units
for the residents?
These first 100 units, I've given them a timeline of about 6 months to bring resolution to that, and we'll continue with the rest as we go along.
Minister, I know that you want to do the necessary due diligence, but for some people out there, it has kept quite long.
I can understand those concerns, but you see, resettlement is not just about providing a concrete building. I cite the example of this island community that has lost its school, it's lost its health center, that needs to be resettled. You need to secure the land. There are chiefs who are even asking for compensation for the land for resettlement. We are limited in resources. You have to negotiate with them. Then somebody, agrees to give us this parcel of land. We get that parcel of land. We're now going to a construction phase. We'll have to now build a school, have to now build a health center. So I can understand those concerns, but we are doing our best. I've been in office for only about 4 weeks. We're doing our best under the circumstances. We pray the victims to bear with us some patience, even as we try to run and do our best for them as quickly as possible.
Before the close of this year, something should be in place for them.
As I've mentioned, the first 100 units that we've started work on, I've given them 6 months to bring a resolution to.
Minister, finally, as we try and wrap up on this discussion, what has been the level of engagement between your ministry, your leadership in Parliament, and even other sectors as well, in trying to make sure that this World Bank facility is passed as soon as possible because of the impact on flood issues and all the rest? That has to be thought to come.
I think the engagements have been very warm. We've attended upon the committees responsible for it. We have provided all the information on what the first 200 million has been utilized and committed for, and what the outstanding balance is, which we cannot commit because the World Bank program doesn't allow us to commit to anything when we don't have full funding for it. We've provided all of that information in detail to the committee. The committee has examined all of that information. The indication we have is that the committee was minded to take the report on the floor on the last day. Unfortunately, the speaker adjourned sine die and didn't allow any further business. We are hopeful that when Parliament resumes, we can take that report and move on. But I must also say that we need to move faster with the execution, even of the first 200 million that's available. It's not just about getting 150 million extra. It's also about moving very fast with what is available. And I think that we have to do both.
And are the necessary drawdowns coming in for you to move
on? The drawdowns are available. It's the consultants who have to be a bit more up and doing with their necessary certifications and approvals so that the contractors can move. As I mentioned, 2 out of the 3 days in a week, I am on the ground to ensure that work gets done.
So where is next for the minister in terms of being on the ground to ensure that the works are fast?
I'm going to go to the eastern side to see the outstanding sea defense projects. We're doing 8 sea defense projects across the country. We want to finish about 4 of them as quickly as possible. We have a number of emergency ones. Cape Coast around the Ekon area, Axim needs an emergency project. Dansuman is getting a bit precarious. There's Station, there's Blekuso. I'm getting reports from Keta that they're also having challenges. So we're going to go on the eastern stretch, I think somewhere next week, right after Easter. I'm also going to go to Koforidua, where one of the affordable housing projects is still outstanding from President Kufuor's era. It's still outstanding from President Kufuor's era. And myself and the Managing Director of State Housing and the board chairman have had some engagement on how we can work with them to provide some funding. It's something we want to prioritize and quickly go to Koforidua as well and see what we can do to bring resolution to that matter.
Minister, how are you also whipping the other ministers into line when it comes to movement of capital and funding? All this work being done on time, funding is critical.
True.
The public sector is quite slow in moving commitment and even releasing of funds and all the rest. What is being done in that part to ensure that whilst you move and you put pressure on the other agencies, and whilst we, the public, are also waiting for these things to be done on time, the donor funding, the Ministry of Finance, controller, and all those things work in line to move the funds on time?
It's a very fair question that you're asking, but I think it's about working in collaboration. You can't whip them in line. You got to collaborate with them so that we share the vision, so that they also get to understand that, listen, if we're able to deliver 8,000 housing units in Pokwase, it works for all of us. So can we prioritize that? Housing is a major need for our people. If we're able to release the 80 million the president has committed for resettlement of persons affected by high water levels, it helps all of us. So can we prioritize and let it work? So for me, I think it's about sharing the challenge, sharing the responsibility, working together. And I'm once again very grateful to my colleague, the Honorable Dr. Amin, who's also hit the ground leaping. He shares our vision of prioritizing some of these, and we're hopeful that we can get some good work together done in these areas.
Minister Oponkum, I appreciate your time so much, and thank you for this opportunity to get details on what government is doing. Another debate will still go on out there about how do we better fix the housing challenge in Ghana here today. My name is George Affi. It has been PM Express Business Edition. Have a great day.